right, good evening, Crypt Keepers, and welcome to Cryptique, where we discuss all things paranormal, occult, UFOs, metaphysical, hidden history, forbidden archaeology, all things truth, and so much more. I am joined by a man who is going to have a roid rage at some point during this podcast. Ryan, how you doing?
Entirely possible. I am doing great. This year, if you've been listening, I have had an upper respiratory infection, bronchitis, double ear infection, sinus infection, and now strep.
Yeah, and most people don't even get strep in their butt. How does that happen?
Yeah, when they're like strep butt, I was like, man, I haven't had strep of any kind in a long time. Yeah, when they said strep, I was really surprised. It's like, I haven't had that in at least 15 years, maybe 20.
They just wanted to poke the back of your throat with a long Q-tip. And
yeah, they're like, is it okay if we do the test? And I was like, I have not had that in a really long time, so I don't know. But yeah, to your point, I am on a steroid unknowingly. I did not know there was a steroid in my antibiotic, so I feel great. I'm all better. I'm a little scratchy, but I'm also hot and I'm amped up because I didn't know there was a steroid in my medicine.
There you go. You mix that with some energy drink and you're fired up, brother.
Yeah, boy.
All right. Well, normally this is the part where Ryan tells you what you need to know, but we really want subscriptions and shares. That's all we're asking. Subscribe and share. Please do this for us. We bring you tons of free content. We do our best. And if you're listening to the show, you must like it a little bit. So all you got to do is click that subscribe button. That is what moves the needle for us. So please do that. I want to give a shout out to Nettie S., Hellcat Handler 84, Haunted Hunter 22, Journey into the Haunted, What's the Big Deal 2023, Sierra C8788. Thank you for interacting with us on social media, for subscribing, for sharing, all that good stuff. So with that out of the way, what are we talking about tonight, Ryan? You want to start us off?
Sure. We are talking about one of your topics, which I had not really heard about. Homicidal sleepwalking.
Good stuff.
So sleepwalking or somnambulism is a sleep disorder characterized by walking or performing other complex actions or behaviors while in a state of deep sleep. People who sleepwalk are typically not aware of their actions and don't remember them after the fact. This usually occurs during non-REM or rapid eye movement sleep, particularly during deep stages of sleep, and is most common in children, although it can occur at any age. And when we talked about this before, I told you I've only ever known of doing it as a kid, but you've done it as an adult.
I'll share the story.
Sure. Go ahead if you want.
All right. So it's pretty funny. Just one night, and so I have trouble sleeping. So I take sleeping meds. And this was, what did they give people when they started doing like sleep driving and stuff like that? Was it Ambien? I don't want to say the wrong thing and get sued or whatever, but
we're not making accusations, but I think it was Ambien. I think I remember that being the one that was like potentially an issue.
So it's, like 11 o'clock, midnight, something like that. And my wife wakes up and I'm not there. And she's like, okay, well, what's going on? Because the lights are all off in the house. There's no noise or anything like that. She is kind of scared. So she runs downstairs to see if my car's still here, which it is. And she goes to my daughter's room, who was probably like 4 at the time. And she's like, have you seen your dad? And she's like, yeah, he's in the closet. And so she's like, what? And she walks to the closet and I'm in the back of I was in the back of the closet trying to part these clothes. And I remember actually thinking, why would somebody hang these clothes in front of my bedroom door? I was mad, Ryan. I was fired up. I'm ready to get somebody. Like, who would do this? This is ridiculous. Who would do something like this? And then, I feel a little tug on my back, and my wife's like, hey, which it can be dangerous to wake someone up, but she's like, hey, you're I think you're sleepwalking. What are you doing? We need to get you back to bed. And she said, I turned around and looked at her right in the eye with my eyes open and said, you don't have the resources. And she's like, what are you talking about? Let's go to bed. And I'm just like, you don't have the resources. You just don't have the resources. And eventually I went to bed. So she did have the resources. Most wives do.
I would never doubt her. No.
Yes, that's my funny one.
My mom, I found this out during my dad's illness towards the end of his life, that my mother, like, she'll wake up and like continue a conversation she was having in a dream. My brother and I found that out. Like, we were like, she would fall asleep on the couch because we're all like, my dad was in hospice. We knew he was going. We were all together. She might fall asleep on the couch for a second, wake up, and she's just talking. And I walked in the one time, and my brother was talking to her, and she had apparently woken up and like looked around and looked at him and said, "That's what happens when kids don't listen to their blankets." And he's like, "What? Kids don't listen to their blankets?" And she's like, "Well, they don't," and just like went back to sleep.
It's true. Hopefully.
We witnessed her do
You
that several times, but she never like started walking around, or at least Sleep Mom did a really good impression of Awake Mom if she was walking around.
That's good stuff. All right, so let's get to the horrific stuff. You want to finish up telling us what it is?
Yeah.
With
Uh,
the
com-
good times out of the way, it's time
yeah.
to move on.
Common behaviors associated with sleepwalking include walking, as you might expect, talking, sitting up in bed, or engaging in more complex activities like moving objects or even driving a vehicle. While sleepwalking itself is generally not harmful, there is a risk of injury due to accidents or unsafe actions taken while in this unconscious state, or in your case, almost like semi conscious, because you were aware of
Yeah,
what you were trying to do and what was around you, just not
it was
totally
another
loose.
dimension.
Yeah. The exact cause of sleepwalking is not fully understood, but factors like stress, sleep deprivation, certain medications, and other sleep disorders can increase the likelihood of it happening.
Absolutely. So send us your crazy sleepwalking stories at cryptiquepodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear about them. Some of them are funny, but some of them are pretty scary too. So send us your sleepwalking stories and we'll do a little TikTok or something like that on them. So
Mhm.
all right, let's start with the Jules Lowe case. So the Jules Lowe case is a significant legal precedent, right? So what that is, if you're not aware, it's basically where lawyers and judges and defense attorneys, anyone can say, okay, this case was like the first of its kind, and it is something that we can refer back to, right? So they can say, well, in Jules Lowe case, you didn't do this or you didn't do that or whatever. So it kind of sets a way that the trial is going to go, and the things that they can bring into evidence and the things that they have to leave out, stuff like that. So it demonstrates the complexities of addressing criminal responsibility in cases involving sleepwalking and other forms of automatism. So it, it's hard, man. I can't imagine being on a jury where, you did something horrible. The defendant allegedly did something horrible and says they were sleepwalking. That is so hard to like prove or disprove, right? So in any case, we already talked about automatism. It's the unconscious or involuntary behavior where a person lacks control over their actions, resulting in behavior that can be dangerous or even deadly. There's several types of automatism, but insane automatism is generally associated with mental disorders or conditions that impact one's ability to form intent, distinguishing it from sane automatism, which might be caused by trauma, or if you're just blackout drunk and pass out, stuff like that. So Jules Lowe case, it highlighted the intersection of criminal justice and mental health. So this was in Manchester, UK, and Jules Lowe killed his 82-year-old father allegedly while sleepwalking. The circumstances prompted an extensive investigation, including multiple tests and expert evaluations to determine the cause of the violent episode. And these investigations basically came to the conclusion that his actions were the result of insane automatism, not deliberate intent or substance abuse. So if I get blackout drunk and I sleepwalk and I kill someone, I don't have that defense because something I did caused that, right? If you take a bunch of different drugs I guess illegal drugs, that is kind of seen as your intent, right? So you can say, oh, I have schizophrenia, I didn't know what I was doing, and this is separately, but you can't use something that you did intentionally that may have caused this action. So you can't say, I'm not guilty of killing all those people because I dosed a bunch of acid and flipped out and thought there were demons coming after me. It's important because it it forms the intent. It is saying, if you do this, you are responsible for your actions, even though your actions may be altered by this decision that you made earlier. Same thing with drinking and driving. You can have a couple drinks, which are going to kind of mess up your ability to distinguish how drunk you are, basically. So you can do this, and it's a choice that you're making repeatedly. Your drunk driving isn't caused by you taking one drink. It's caused by you making this decision repeatedly to drink more when you really know you shouldn't, even though your decision making ability is impaired by the alcohol that you drank. So it's a weird dichotomy. But in any case, in this case, the acquittal didn't mean like, oh, you're cool, go back to the streets and do your thing. They saw that this was a risk to public safety, because who knows? We don't know enough about it. This could happen again, right? And he was put in a psychiatric institute for treatment and observation. And his acquittal raised questions about the balance between personal responsibility and mental health. So the decision to acquit, I don't know. How do you feel about it, Ryan? Because it's something that could happen again if you've never shown this intent before, and then all of a sudden one night you sleepwalk and you kill somebody. Well, can we just let you back out? I
I
don't know.
just to let somebody out based on that. I mean, they just acquitted.
Mhm.
There's no like we want you to go to an institution or be
No, they
observed.
did. No,
Oh,
they did. They sent him to an institution.
what
Um,
was the length of time on that? I don't.
I couldn't find exactly how long.
I mean, I
Uh,
guess I don't know. I feel like, yeah, they ordered him to be placed in a psychiatric institution.
how long is enough? I
Yeah,
mean,
I
if you
don't know.
keep
I don't know.
having
That's the thing. It's
sleepwalking
like
issues, they're going to keep you in there,
I feel
I
like
would
I've
think.
always felt like the insanity thing is almost scarier. It's like I shouldn't be responsible for my actions. I'm so crazy I didn't even know what was going on. It's like
Yeah.
that's worse. You could
Yeah.
just do that at any time.
Yeah.
You could just be like walking down the candy aisle at your local grocery store and just flip out.
Yeah.
That's so much scarier than like you had some reason to do something.
Yeah.
You know, does that make sense?
Absolutely. Because
So I mean,
you,
yeah, saying that he needs to be placed in an institution. What I was meaning is that like is that a kind of a substitute for some period
for,
of time to try to determine if he is a threat or how to control these episodes, if
mhm.
he has a history of this behavior? Because I mean, you were trying to walk through a closet because in your sleepwalking mind it was a doorway. Well,
Yeah.
and technically you were right. It is a doorway. There's just only one door, and and it didn't go where you
Yeah.
thought. But I don't know.
Well, here's how I see it. If you do anything at all to hide your actions, you are not insane. If you know that what you're doing is against the law, whether you know it's right or wrong, at that point, in my mind, you are sane. If you kill somebody and you walk out into the street and you say, I killed somebody, I don't know what happened, then I could say, well, let's explore this further. But if you say, I killed somebody, I buried them, I hid the murder weapon, I lied about everything, I covered everything up, you're not insane, because you know that what you're doing is going to lead to you being imprisoned or possibly put to death, depending
Yeah.
on the severity of what you did. So that's, in my mind, if you do anything to hide it, you're guilty, or at least not insane. Put it that way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that
I
makes
don't know. It's such a hard thing, and that's why it's such an interesting topic, because there's just not that many cases of it. But I think with that, we can hop to the Albert Terrell case. You want to tell us about that one?
yeah. The case of Albert Terrell dates back to 1845 and remains one of the earliest documented instances of this sleepwalking defense in criminal trials. Terrell's acquittal marked a significant event in legal history, highlighting the complexities of establishing guilt or innocence when claims of somnambulism are involved. So, like we're talking here, who do you blame? And
Yeah.
what precautions do you take for an action that may not be somebody's fault? On October 27th, 1845, Albert Terrell, a wealthy and prominent Bostonian, visited a brothel in Boston to see Maria Ann Bickford, a sex worker with whom he was intimately involved, as, as you might expect. Um, Did you know, just a quick side note, there are economists who track the health of the economy through sex work.
Hmm.
And the theory is actually pretty good that sex work and strippers and things like that are like the epitome of discretionary spending. It is the very picture of unnecessary wasting of money. And
Yeah,
the
but
more that drops off, the more of an indicator it is that you're heading towards recession or depression.
I see what you're saying, but I also have to take into account addiction. And I
True.
guess you can try and find a way to figure that in. And I guess the addicts are still going to be doing
Yeah.
it.
You're probably
So,
gonna have like half of it drop off. Because
yeah.
you've got your like your American Psycho types who just go for grins because they have the money.
Hmm.
And then other people who are hooked for whatever reason. Anyway, I just thought it was really interesting. Like I've heard of it before, but then I watched a video by an economist and he was like, hear me out. There's actually some validity to this. Like, let me plot out some of the data.
Well, I think you can also track how many of these sex workers are actually just doing it to pay for law school. So,
Yeah. All right. So,
all right.
according to accounts, Terrell was overtaken by jealousy after learning that Bigfoot had recently been with another customer.
Surprise.
Man, that
Oh,
arrangement is not what you thought it was,
right.
Albert. His reaction was severe. He reportedly cut Bigfoot's throat and set fire to multiple rooms in the brothel before so close.
Steroids.
His reaction was severe. He reportedly cut Bigfoot's throat and set fire to multiple rooms in the brothel before fleeing the scene. Despite the evidence pointing to Terrell's involvement in the crime, his defense team presented an unusual argument that he was a chronic sleepwalker and had committed these heinous acts during a sleepwalking episode, rendering him unaware of his actions and devoid of criminal intent. The defense, known as automatism, has been used in rare circumstances, which we're talking about here, to argue that a defendant's actions were involuntary due to sleep disorder or another form of unconsciousness. Terrell's defense lawyers were successful in convincing the jury that his sleepwalking condition made him incapable of forming the necessary intent to commit the crime, leading to a verdict of not guilty. So he was sleepwalking, so the fact that he was jealous didn't really matter. Couldn't have been that he was wealthy, right? The case's outcome stunned many as it was a highly unusual defense strategy that resulted in acquittal despite the violent nature of the crime. Given the absence of modern forensic science and the relatively limited understanding of sleep disorders at the time, it is unclear whether the defense's claims of sleepwalking were accurate or just a clever strategy for the time. The jury's decision to acquit, despite the weight of evidence, suggests that the defense's argument resonated with, potentially influenced by the novelty of the defense and Terrell's high social standing.
Yeah.
This case set a precedent for the use of the sleepwalking defense in criminal trials, though it remains rare and often highly scrutinized. So, there's so many stories like this in a way where it's like somebody of a high social status or a pillar of the community ends up doing something horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And it like screws with people's worldview. So they don't want to believe that it's happening. I mean, there's a case in the game LA Noire that's like that. Like you solve this murder, but it's like the mayor's nephew who's killing people. So you're told to like bury it. Or, I think some of the stories in Sin City were like that, where it's like somebody really well connected. Nobody wants to believe that it's them that's the problem. I've even had, like you and I'm sure I've probably had these conversations with people about guns. Because I had a friend of mine I've always considered myself a little bit left leaning, but pretty centrist. Now I have no idea. But she's a little bit more to the left than me. And we were talking about guns. And she was saying, like, well, why should anybody be able to shoot off like 40 rounds in a couple minutes? It's like, wait, that's kind of a weird question to ask. It's like, I happen to have a magazine that will hold 40 something rounds that goes into any Glock. Like any Glock that takes the full size.
Hard to shoot, but
yeah, it's like, yeah, because you have like a 2-foot long thing coming out the bottom of your gun. She's like, why do you have that? I said, because it was $20 at like Bass Pro.
yeah.
Like I just saw it. It's like, oh, look, zombie killer. Isn't that funny? And she's like, well, but that's you. Like you would never do anything. And I was like, no one at a store has ever sold somebody a gun thinking this guy's probably going to snap and kill some people with this.
Yeah.
They all looked at
You
that
can buy
person.
the gun, sir, but we can't sell you any ammo today. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
every single one of them has been like, "You check out. It's you. It's okay." The same way she just said that to me.
Yep. Well, here's why you might need it, because you're a terrible shot and there's 20 people trying to get into your house. At what point do you have to give away your right for protection and submit to, at what point do you give up your right to protection and just have to submit to home invaders? Well, why would you need more than 5 rounds? It's only one person breaking into your house, and you should just shoot them and shoot the gun out of their hand. Don't shoot them, shoot the gun. At what point do I not have the right to defend myself anymore?
Yeah,
If
it's like
someone
you want
breaks in my
me.
house and I've got a 10-round magazine, shit, I'm going to be nervous as hell. You know what I mean? You're going to miss a couple times. So is it like, well, you can fire 5 rounds, but after that, you just have to do whatever they want? It's ridiculous. And we don't really need to get into it on this one, but that's my stance. You don't have, there's never been a limit put on it. Shut the fuck up. Move on. I'm sorry, gun haters, but that's how it is.
For me, the whole point of this sort of sidebar is that there's, I think, just too much credibility given to certain people based on the fact that they've never done anything like that, or they're wealthy, or they're in a position that's, usually requires somebody of upstanding character. It's like anybody is capable of snapping.
Yeah.
Like I met a girl.
It couldn't be Hillary. She looks like my grandma.
I met a girl years ago who wanted to go on a date. She wanted to meet like somewhere in East St. Louis because we were both into photography, and she's like, "Oh, there's some really cool like abandoned buildings and graffiti and stuff." I was like, "One, no, it's a bad idea. Like you're new to the city. That's not where we're gonna go. 2, don't just meet somebody you don't know very well someplace so remote."
Right.
She's like, "But I trust you," and I was like, "You shouldn't." Because somebody who's trying to lure you out is going to get you to trust them just like
they're not going to be like, "Hey, do you want to come and get killed? Meet me here."
Yeah.
Hey, are you into rape? Meet me at this secluded spot where, if y'all don't know, East St. Louis, I think they're trying to do some kind of
There's some
rebuilding.
gentrification going on, yeah.
But it is basically a shithole where people go to find drugs, find prostitutes, and get murdered. So
I actually drove through East St. Louis a couple months ago. There's almost nothing left. Like the few things that are left are the buildings that are still in use for some constructive purpose. And other than that, a lot of it's been torn down. So I think it's in the process of being rebuilt now.
East St. Louis is where you blow stop signs on purpose and hope a cop pulls you over and you can follow them out of that area. That's about what it is. All right, let's get back.
I know people who had that happen to them like 30 years ago. They'd like the police would pull them over, like, "You don't look like you're from here. Follow us."
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, let's move on. So the next case is Kenneth Parks. So this is from May of 1987, and this one's often cited as probably the most notable case. So Kenneth Parks, a young Canadian from Toronto. Now, keep in mind, we're going to different countries here. So the punishment, the laws of what may be acceptable evidence, stuff like that, are kind of shifting. So he had a history of chronic insomnia and significant stress due to financial and gambling issues. So on the night of the crime, Parks, he was only 23 and he had all these issues already. Wow. So he got in his car and drove 14 miles to his in-laws' house in Scarborough, Ontario. And while there, he committed a series of violent acts. He stabbed his mother-in-law to death and severely injured his father-in-law. Now, thankfully, he stopped short of harming his teenage sister-in-law. After the attacks, Parks regained consciousness and, in a state of intense distress, drove to a nearby police station where he confessed to the crimes. His unexpected arrival and immediate admission of guilt made the incident particularly startling to law enforcement officers, as you may suspect. Despite his confession, a detailed investigation revealed that Parks suffered from a rare condition known as dissociative analgesia. This condition involves a state of extreme dissociation and numbness to pain, often related to significant stress or sleep disorders. It's associated with sleepwalking and similar behaviors during sleep. Psychological profiles and medical exams supported the idea that Parks had no conscious intent to harm anyone during the attack, suggesting that he was indeed sleepwalking, Ryan. During his trial, the defense provided compelling evidence of Park's history of sleep disorders and the psychological impact of chronic insomnia, anxiety, and mounting gambling debts. This combination of factors, the defense argued, triggered a sleepwalking episode that led to the violent crimes, with Parks acting without awareness or intent. The jury ultimately acquitted Parks, accepting the defense's argument that he was not criminally responsible due to his dissociative state at the time of the murders. So this reaffirmed the notion that criminal intent is a crucial component in legal proceedings, and that certain medical and psychological conditions can negate that intent. And the case has since become a reference point for discussions on sleepwalking related crimes and how they intersect with legal and mental health considerations. And as far as I know, he was just let go. Like he didn't, I'm sure he was required to continue his treatment, that he was already, doctors were aware of this beforehand. And I think that's a big deal, because it's like, if somebody who's never had this issue before is just like, oh, this is the first time I've ever, sleepwalked in my life, and I just went out and murdered some people. That's a little different than, man, I'm taking this medication, I'm sleepwalking all the time. There's been a couple times I woke up and I was, down the block in my pajamas. I had no idea what was going on. You're telling your doctor this, you're telling your therapist this. Then something like that happens. I can see where that's believable to me. But if you're someone that says, I've never sleptwalked before, but I didn't want to hurt anybody, so I must have been sleepwalking, I'm going to look for, alternative motives. Because if this guy didn't have this background and he knew, well, hell, if, my wife's parents die, she's going to inherit the house. That's kind of a red flag for me. So, so far we're seeing this defense working. And I think that defense attorneys, their job is to defend their client, and they're going to do everything they can possibly think of to make that happen. And whether you like them or not, that's their job. That's what they do. And they really don't care how they do it. Their job's to get you free, and that's it. But I can see in this case how he went straight to the police. That's a big deal to me too. I just did this. Help me. What's wrong with me? I need help. He's going and asking for help. It's not like, it's not like he's really making excuses. He's going in and saying, I did this.
Or
I
hiding it,
don't,
yeah.
I don't remember how I did it. I just know that I woke up and I was at their house and the mom's dead and I'm covered in blood and I have these cuts on my hand, because people always cut their hand when they're trying to stab somebody. It just slides down the handle and cuts them. And I think that's what they're talking about with his dissociative analgesia, where he doesn't feel the pain of the blade slicing his hand repeatedly, stuff like that. So I think this case is I can buy this as that, yes, it probably was some kind of weird sleepwalking, but you can't lock somebody in their room. You can't chain them to their bed, because they have to be able to escape their house in a fire or something like that. So then what do we do? What do we do with this?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a hard one. Ryan, tell us about William Bow Shears.
So it is crucial to understand that the sleepwalking defense does not automatically exonerate someone from a crime, hopefully. It requires compelling evidence and expert testimony to support the claim of automatism. Again, unless it's like 1845, in which case, if it's novel enough and you entertain a jury, I guess maybe you can get away with it. Although I don't know, I wasn't there. Maybe they had expert witnesses. Who knows? I tend to think that one was probably just like creative.
It can almost be thrown out, because people believed in a lot of different stuff back in 1845. There's probably people where you could go in and be like, I'm pretty sure it was a succubus. She came and infested him and told him to do this. And they'd be like, oh my gosh, happened to my uncle, So they're more likely to believe stuff like that. But sorry, go ahead.
So the idea is you need to demonstrate that the accused person was truly, genuinely not aware of what they were doing. And one example of that, allegedly, is the case of Sergeant Willis Bowshears, a U.S. soldier stationed in England. On January 1st, 1961, Bowshears was accused of strangling Jean Constable, a young woman in his apartment. Following the murder, Boshears claimed to have awoken to find that he had killed Constable, suggesting that he was sleepwalking at the time of the crime and had no memory of his actions. To cover up the incident, he
There we
disposed of
go.
her body in a remote location but was eventually arrested and charged with her murder. Despite the incriminating evidence, including his attempts to hide the body, the court ultimately acquitted Boshears, accepting the sleepwalking defense as a valid explanation for the crime. The court's decision to acquit was based on the argument that Boshears was not consciously in control of his actions when the crime occurred. The lack of intent to commit murder and the claim of involuntary behavior were key factors in the ruling. This is pretty stock standard as far as these cases go. His
Yeah.
acquittal raised concerns about the use of the sleepwalking defense to avoid accountability for violent crimes, and critics argue that allowing such a defense creates a potential loophole for defendants to escape punishment for heinous acts, while
Yeah.
proponents emphasize that sleepwalking is a genuine condition that can cause individuals to engage in complex behaviors without conscious awareness.
Which I think we know is true, but what's the percentage? I mean,
Yeah.
it's it's got to be just completely minute. Like I can't imagine, if sleepwalking like led to this kind of thing, there would be tons of studies and stuff like that. Like how can we fix sleepwalking? Because people are going out there and killing people when they're sleepwalking. And
Yeah.
it's just it's just not the case. But it worked again, right?
Yeah, but it goes back to exactly what you were saying earlier. If you have the wherewithal to be like, "Oh, this is
Mhm.
really bad. I gotta potentially make this worse by trying to hide a body."
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a little suspicious.
Yeah. All right. So let's go on to Scott
I'm,
Falater.
yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm just a little bit more likely to believe like the person who comes in and is like, "I don't know what happened. Like this, I must have been asleep. I must have done this."
When you
Uh,
cover it up, that's a crime. So even if the murder wasn't intentional, he didn't do it on purpose, it wasn't premeditated or whatever, you are still guilty of covering up a crime, hiding a body, whatever abuse of a corpse, all these different charges. And it's like you can say, okay, well, okay, fine. Fine. Let's just say you were sleepwalking when you did this. You're still getting charged with all these other crimes. You're still going to jail, buddy, because you covered it up. I mean, you hid the body. Someone who's innocent doesn't do that. You know what I mean? It just, they don't. So, or people that are genuinely crazy, they don't realize they did something wrong. So they're not going to try and cover it up. So anyway, moving on, the case of Scott Falater. That's a great name, and I don't think someone would make fun of you in grade school for being called a falater, but when you made it to middle school and high school, you might take some abuse on
what
that
you
one,
got to
especially if you're a dude.
what you got into some bio classes? Yeah.
Yeah. So this case, it changed things a little bit. Um, they tried to use the sleepwalking defense. So despite his defense team's claims that he was not in control of his actions due to sleepwalking, in this case, the jury found him guilty of the brutal murder of his wife, Yarmelia Falater, highlighting the importance of intent, evidence, and plausibility. So the story goes in January 1997, Scott Falater in Phoenix, Arizona, stabbed his wife, Yarmila, 44 times with a hunting knife. The brutal nature of the attack, coupled with other actions Falater took during and after the murder, raised questions about his level of awareness. So, according to reports, he quieted his dog. I don't think that's something most people do when they're sleepwalking. He
Yeah.
attempted to conceal the evidence. And I mean, that just proves deliberation, right? It's like you don't try and cover up the evidence if you're sleepwalking. It's not like I jumped out of the closet. I'm like, no, 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 no. I wasn't sleepwalking. You're like, what happened? You wake up and you're like, I'm confused. I don't know what happened. But anyway, a neighbor also saw him roll her into the pool and hold her head underwater after stabbing her. Now, I can see, violence. Like if someone tries to wake you up, you punch them, right? You're confused. You don't know what happened. That's fight or flight. That's how you react. But you have to have intent when you're sleepwalking to understand, like, okay, this person is just about finished, right? And I hate to say it like that, but they're just about to die. So I need to finish them off. I understand that if I put them in the pool and hold their head underwater, they won't be able to get oxygen and they will die. So that's, for me, that's it. This neighbor has no reason to lie, right? He saw it. So the prosecution presented a compelling counter-argument suggesting that Falater had clear motives. They argued that the couple's marriage was strained and Yarmilia was considering leaving him due to his intense dedication to the Mormon faith and his desire for more children, which she did not want. The prosecution also pointed to other factors that cast doubt on his sleepwalking defense, like Yarmilia was not wearing her wedding ring when her body was found, and I don't know. I mean, some people look at that and say, okay, well, the marriage was over. Some people look at it and they might say, well, yeah, it was a gold wedding ring and she took a shower before she went to bed and didn't put it back on, you know. So there's other. But they highlighted the methodical way he attempted to cover up the crime, like cleaning up the crime scene and hiding the murder weapon, which is not someone who is unconscious, right? So the evidence for his sleepwalking was weak, and witnesses and medical experts were unable to provide clear support for his claim. And the jury ultimately, found him guilty on all charges in 1999. So there's one where it failed. We're looking at 1999. We're looking before it, 1845, no problem. Yeah, you were sleepwalking. 1961. Oh man, yeah, you were sleepwalking. Here we go in 1999, where there's a little bit more, the circumstances were different, but there's also a lot more known about sleepwalking. And I think that we are going to see this change a little bit. But that's all I've got for later. Who's next?
There you go for later. There's just so many good jokes. Save it for later. All right. Next we have Antonio Nieto.
Sounds
I just
good
want to
to
say
me.
Nieto.
I think it's Nieto.
Probably Nieto.
Yeah.
The case of Antonio from Malaga, Spain. The case of Antonio from Malaga, Spain is a chilling example of a violent crime where the perpetrator claimed to be sleepwalking. Dun dun dun. Be quite a twist if all our stories weren't about that today.
Yeah.
Despite his defense story, the court found him guilty, indicating the claims of sleepwalking or dreaming must meet stringent criteria to be considered valid in a court of law. This was January 11th of 2001 that Antonio committed a gruesome crime, killing his wife and mother-in-law with an axe and severely injuring his own daughter. His son, who was also injured, eventually disarmed him and called the authorities. According to the police reports, his children claim that their father called them by name during the attack and warned them not to turn on the lights because their mother, who was already deceased at the time, was sleeping. Despite this evidence, he presented a different narrative during his defense, alleging that he was asleep during the attack and dreaming about defending himself against a pack of aggressive ostriches.
Yep. That's what happens when you breed a Canadian goose with an ostrich. They get mean.
They get real mean. And I don't doubt that at all. This bizarre explanation was used to justify his violent actions, suggesting that he was not in control or aware of what he was doing at the time. The court did not accept this sleepwalking or a dream-based explanation. Instead, they concluded that his violent actions were deliberate and not attributable to any unconscious states. Antonio's claim was found lacking credibility, especially given the details provided by his children, which indicated that he was aware of his surroundings and capable of communication during the attack. As a result, he was sentenced to 10 years in a mental institution, reflecting the court's assessment of his mental state and the need to ensure public safety. Additionally, he lost custody of his children, with the courts mandating that he always maintain a distance of at least 500 meters from them, which just further goes to indicate the level of risk the court system believed that he posed to his own kids.
Yeah.
Which I don't disagree. I think half a kilometer is maybe a little too close.
Yeah.
The court's rejection of his defense demonstrates that these claims must be supported by convincing evidence and they must hold up to some scrutiny, because some of these really didn't. But
true.
I appreciate that at least as we're getting into the 2000s, they're like, whoa. You can't we have eyewitnesses who watched you do this and
Yeah.
talked to you during it. We're
Yeah.
not just going to blindly take
People
this.
who love you, people who would never lie to make you look guilty. You know what I mean? Your kids are not going to be, especially young kids, are not going to be like, how can we,
This
get
is my
dad
chance to get
sent
rid of that
away?
fat bastard. Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing for me too is like ostriches. I mean, did you just like, how do you come up with that? Do you just look at like you open up a book on animals and you're like, whatever I go to, it's, I was being attacked by ostriches. It's weird. It's bizarre. And
Yeah.
that adds a little bit of credibility to me.
True.
I think it was hey, I've got a crazy idea. If I just say it was ostriches, they'll think I'm crazy and I'll go free or whatever. But this guy knew what he was doing. He did it and it worked because he got 11 months. 11. Now he lost his kids, but who knows? I mean, he attacked his son too. So it's not like, it's not like they were grown kids that, lived away and they're like, no, we believe in our dad or what. They were attacked too and probably would have been murdered had his son not been able to disarm him. But here we are. He got 11 months. So
10 years, but
or
10
no, he
years,
got 10 years.
10 years
Okay.
in a mental
Where was I
institution.
coming up with 11 months? Maybe that was a lot.
I don't
I
know.
don't know.
Bro,
But
we've
anyway,
talked about so many of these, including ones that I'm sure aren't in here.
but I mean, 10 years in a mental institution's better than the rest of your life in prison.
Yeah.
But I do think that during that time, they could also find reasons to keep him. Be like, no, this guy is still sleepwalking frequently, or he's been
Screaming about
violent to other.
ostriches.
He's not cooperating in our, treatment plans, stuff like that. All right, so let's get to Mr. Brian Thomas. The case of Brian Thomas is a poignant example of how sleep disorders, particularly sleepwalking, can lead to tragic outcomes. In this case, the court accepted the defense of automatism, resulting in all charges being dropped. Brian Thomas and his wife had been married for over 40 years, and in July 2008, they were on holiday in a camper van. During the night, Thomas reportedly had a vivid dream in which an intruder broke into their camper. In his dream, Thomas defended his family by attacking the perceived intruder, but when he awoke, he was horrified to discover that he had strangled his wife during his sleep. Upon realizing what had happened, Thomas was visibly distraught and immediately called EMS to report the incident. His reaction and the circumstances surrounding the event were consistent with someone who had no conscious intent to harm. Family members, including the couple's daughter, testified that Thomas had a history of sleepwalking and would often behave strangely during these episodes. Further context was provided by the fact that Thomas had been taking medication for depression, but had stopped shortly before the holiday due to its side effect of causing impotence. One of the known side effects of discontinuing such medication is vivid, realistic nightmares, which might have contributed to the dream he experienced on the night of the tragic incident. So, given this evidence and expert testimony during the trial supporting this, claim of automatism, the court decided to drop all charges. The court's decision recognized that he was not consciously aware of his actions and had no criminal intent at the time of the killing. All right. So, we gonna get this guy some treatment? Are we going to just be like, all right, well, you're free. You didn't mean to. Good luck. Don't kill anybody else by accident. You're muted. But yeah, I don't know.
That
I
was a
feel
little
like this was a case of sleepwalking murder, but I also feel like I don't think this guy should, go to prison for the rest of his life, but there is public safety to take into account too.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You want to, hey, what if you were dating somebody and they're like, I feel like I need to be honest with you. I killed my last husband in my sleep. I was sleepwalking. Is that a deal breaker?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah. I don't know. Some of these medicines should probably be maybe not more regulated, but there should be more supervision. Like your
Yeah.
doctor should be checking on you more often. Like, are you taking that? Are you still taking it? You didn't
Yeah.
stop taking it suddenly. Like, remember, you can't do that because
You kill people.
whatever could happen. Yeah.
We'll give you some boner pills, dude. You'll be fine. I'm sure they would be more than happy to, prescribe Viagra or whatever than to be like, yeah, just stop taking your antidepressants for a week and see what happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Okay.
But
So next we have a guy from Kentucky who shoots a hotel porter. So this person only referred to as Fane from 1879 in Kentucky is another kind of more historical example of this. There's not much widely available information on this, but what there is, we're going to tell you about. It kind of goes along with what we're talking about anyway. But Thane fell asleep in the lobby of a Kentucky hotel. When a porter tried to wake him, he reacted violently, drawing a pistol and shooting the porter 3 times. As the porter fell to the ground, witnesses reported that Fane, writhed with glee, repeatedly shouting, "Hoo-wee!" This behavior seemed to reflect a state of heightened excitement or disorientation. However, following this outburst, Fane displayed deep remorse and walked to the front desk to confess his crime, showing a complete change in demeanor. Basically, this is how I assume everybody in Kentucky is. I don't really know. I'm not allowed back there. Initially, Fane was convicted of manslaughter. But the evidence pointed to a violent reaction when disturbed from sleep, and his initial outburst seemed deliberate.
Mm-hmm.
So, you woke up, you're startled, you shoot.
And
Manslaughter
celebrate.
seems kind of appropriate. Yeah, apart from like the hoo-wee thing and then turning himself into like the concierge. Those are a little different.
Yeah.
Upon appeal, new information about his chronic somnambulism came to light, indicating that he had a long history of sleepwalking and unusual behavior. The appeal process focused on whether his actions were the result of unconsciousness and whether he had real criminal intent.
Yeah.
His sudden shift from violent aggression to remorse upon waking supported the idea that he might not have been fully aware of his actions. Based on this evidence, the conviction was reversed, suggesting that the court accepted that Fane's behavior could be attributed to sleepwalking conditions or, whatever altered unconscious state. The court's reversal on appeal indicates that evidence of chronic sleepwalking can have a significant impact on legal outcomes, particularly when it suggests that the actions were involuntary. I would say that it also helps that there were witnesses. If this is true, if the information we have is true, there are people there who saw him wake, draw, shoot, freak out in a happy way, freak out in a remorseful way. Yeah. And just behave really strangely in quick succession.
Yeah.
This is not somebody who did this on purpose, because it's like, oh, good, I hate this porter, and I've been waiting for him to start something all night.
Well, it reminds me, I think it was Family Guy, where they're like in court, and the Kool-Aid man busts through the wall, and he's like, "Hey, oh, sorry," and then just like backs out. He wakes up and he's like, "Bang, woo-wee!" Oh, sorry. But
again, this is 1879 that we're talking about, so it's hard to say.
Which is basically like 1700s if you're in Kentucky.
How rigorous, yeah.
Just kidding, Kentucky. All right.
Yeah, I'm just going to leave it there. I'm not even going to make any more jokes.
Isom Bradley. The 1925 case of Isom Bradley, a resident of Texas, is an intriguing instance where a jury's initial conviction was overturned due to, the evidence of this sleepwalking. So Isom Bradley, I'm assuming that's how you say it. I don't know how else you would say that. It's ISOM.
I've heard it before. I've heard it said Isom.
Isom Bradley had a conversation with his girlfriend, Ada Jenkins, about his fears surrounding a man named Lawrence Williams. Bradley was anxious and apprehensive, concerned that Williams might attack him while he slept. Paranoia there. To protect himself, Bradley kept a gun under his pillow before going to bed, hoping to be ready in case this guy comes to kill him in his sleep. Late that night, Bradley was awakened by a noise and in a state of somnambulism. I'll get it right. He instinctively reached for his gun and fired shots into the room. After regaining full consciousness, he lit a lamp and made a horrifying discovery, Ryan. He'd accidentally shot and killed Ada Jenkins, his own girlfriend. So after the incident, Bradley was charged and convicted of murder. The conviction implied that Bradley had acted with intent or awareness, despite his claim that he was sleepwalking at the time of the shooting. But on appeal, new evidence and expert testimony suggested that Bradley's actions could have been caused by sleepwalking. So we've talked about it. Sleepwalking can involve complex and automatic behaviors performed without the conscious awareness or intent. Bradley's nervous state and fear before going to bed, coupled with the presence of the gun, created a risky environment where sleepwalking could lead to unintended consequences. Courts reconsidered Bradley's case, considering the evidence supporting his somnambulant state during the shooting. So with the new information, they overturned the conviction, leading to Bradley's release. And the court's decision recognized the possibility that Bradley's actions were probably involuntary and that he lacked the intent necessary for a murder conviction. Where do you stand on this one, man? I mean, if you're having a lot of sleepwalking episodes, you do a bunch of strange things in your sleep. I mean, I wouldn't sleep with a gun under my pillow because I would be afraid that, despite all the safeguards, you could accidentally, click the safety. It would be hard to cock it. And I don't know if this was a revolver or not, but I mean, you could do something like that in your sleep unintentionally. And if this guy was like, I got to be ready to blast as soon as I hear a noise, that gun, I'm assuming back then it was probably a revolver, but, it was loaded and ready to go. All you got to do, pull that trigger,
Yeah, that's why I would
I
never
guess
keep
it can
one.
happen.
I would never keep one like ready to go by my bed for that reason.
No,
I wouldn't
no.
want it in my mind to be like as soon as you hear a noise, you reach for it. So
Yeah.
this seems more like the manslaughter from before would be appropriate here.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know. At least it doesn't seem it doesn't say that he tried to hide anything, right?
Right.
There's nothing. There's like, oh, I sleepwalked and killed them and wiped the blood off this and burned all my clothes that I was wearing at the time.
Hid the body and was like, I don't know where she went. She ran
And
off
then I
with
woke up and
the
came
guy that
straight
was
here to
coming.
the police station.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I woke up and she ran away with the guy that was coming to kill me. That's all I know.
I mean, this seems like one of those things that tragically happens.
Yeah.
That a guy hears somebody in his house and takes his gun to find who it is and accidentally kills a family member.
That's why you got to have a dog, man. A dog will wake you up before anybody gets in. You got plenty of time to, go to your safe. If you've got the fingerprint thing and that's another thing. If you keep your weapon in a safe, which you should, you can go with the one that has like the fingerprint thing, which is for quick access. It's a good idea. But if you keep your weapon in a safe that has a combination or a key, but especially a combination, and you say, I was sleepwalking, I know you can drive and stuff like that, but I don't buy that you can just be like, oh, I remember the combination to the safe and, accurately open the safe. I don't know. I don't buy it.
I would find that hard to believe too. Yeah.
All right. Stephen Reitz.
Yeah.
Hey.
So did you have something to say about him before we get started?
No, I thought I did, but I did not.
Okay. So
I was sleepwalking.
Straight into the story. All right. So Stephen Reitz murdered his lover, Ava Weinfurtner, which is a very old school sounding name considering that this happened in 2001 while on vacation on Catalina Island, California. He claims to lack memory of the murder because of sleepwalking, which was rejected by the jury, largely due to evidence of prior abusive behavior and threats towards Ava. The murder itself was particularly brutal, involving multiple methods of violence. According to Lindsay Lyon of U.S. News and World Report, Reitz smashed her head with a flower pot, dislocating her arm and leaving shards in her scalp. He also punctured her with a plastic fork.
That's hard to do, man. Now think about this. Think about this, Ryan. If you're going to attack somebody with a metal fork, yeah, you can stab them. But I'm pretty confident that in most places, if you went to stab me with a plastic fork, it would just break. Yeah. I don't see like a lot, like you would have to be awake, conscious, and accurate, and probably somewhat skilled to actually puncture somebody with a plastic fork.
Yeah. So he also fractured her wrist, jaw, ribs, facial bones, and skull, and used a pocket knife to leave 3 deep stab wounds in the back of her neck. Reitz claimed to have no memory of the crime, suggesting that he had brief flashbacks, but believing he was under attack by an intruder. So the defense implied that he was in a state of somnambulism and did not consciously commit the crime. However, the prosecution countered these claims with evidence of his history of domestic violence. The jury heard testimony that Reitz had previously threatened Weinfurtner with a knife and told her he would gut her like a fish. I just feel like I should get her name right. Weinfurtner. Or at least that seems right.
That's how the Swedish chef would say it.
Yeah. This evidence of prior violence and threats suggests that his behavior on that night was consistent with an established pattern of abuse and not the result of sleepwalking. The prosecution argued that that claim was an attempt to excuse a premeditated act of violence. Ultimately, he was convicted of the murder. So
So
I think it's pretty hard to say, oh, I was sleepwalking, I was dreaming about emus or whatever. So I stabbed her with a spork from KFC that somehow went into the skin, like messed up her wrist, ribs, jaw, facial bones, and skull, and then switched weapons again
yeah,
and stabbed her 3 times.
with a pocket knife that you have to open, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's something to consider too, because I mean, yeah, you can drive, you can do all that stuff, but I don't know, man. I think that maybe opening a pocket knife, like it doesn't sound like these were, except for the spork, were like real
Like an
weapons of
opportunity.
opportunity. You
Yeah.
know, like if someone says, "Oh, they woke me up in the kitchen and there was a knife there and I grabbed it." That's one thing. But when you say, "Well, I beat her with the flower pot. I beat her probably with my fists or something else that we don't really have a weapon for," like they didn't say a baseball bat or something like that. And then you switch again and go to a knife. I mean, it sounds like psychotic overkill, but
Mhm.
not sleepwalking. So, and also that flower pot is going to be loud when it breaks, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming it's like the terracotta. That makes a pretty loud sound when it breaks, and you would think that might, snap somebody out of sleepwalking, but not in this case. And I think they got it right. What do you think?
Yeah, I think they got it right too.
All right, moving on to Down Under. In 1950, Ivy Congdon of Carnegie, which I'm assuming that's how you say it, but they say some things weird in Australia that, anyway, so it's in Australia. Now, Ivy had a history of sleepwalking and acting out her dreams, leading to unexpected and dangerous behavior. In one prior instance, Congdon had learned about a local resident who was breeding red spiders for sale as pets. What the fuck are you doing breeding spiders for pets? Anyway, this knowledge influenced her nightmares, leading to a dream that her daughter was being attacked by spiders. While asleep, Congdon attempted to brush the imaginary spiders off her daughter's body, a behavior stemming from her sleepwalking condition. Then on August 11th, 1950, tragedy struck. So Ivy Congdon dreamt of a scenario in which Korean soldiers were attacking her home, prompted by the idea that her daughter might become a transport driver if Korea attacked Australia. Okay. In her dream, Congdon felt compelled to defend her home and her family, so she grabbed an axe and fought off the imaginary intruder. Tragically, upon awakening, she found that she had inadvertently killed her own daughter. The case was brought to court where Congdon's defense was centered around her sleepwalking and the associated history of sleepwalking induced behavior. The courts considered Congdon's prior episodes, her history of acting out her dreams, and expert testimony, leading them to believe that she genuinely did not have conscious intent to harm her daughter. The tragic incident was attributed to her sleepwalking condition, and the courts set her free. Man, again, I don't think I believe this one. First off, I believe this was a sleepwalking induced murder. But do you get to go free? I mean, that's the thing I'm having problems with here. What's next? Oh, I dreamt that my neighbors were aliens and they were going to kill everyone, so I shot them all to death. Well,
Mhm.
I was sleepwalking. I mean, I have a history of it. Just look back. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, maybe I believe this person was sleepwalking and did not intend to murder her daughter, but you got to do something.
Yeah.
Got to do something. Got to keep us safe. That's what we pay you for.
I mean, dogs get put down all the time for biting people, and they don't mean to do anything bad for the most part. They're either defending their territory or their family.
Yep, you're right.
And we're
Put them
talking
down.
about
We
people
can't
with a
risk it.
condition that just make them randomly murder.
Yeah,
That's
it's scary stuff, man. All right, I think we got one more. Tell us about old Joe.
the case of Joseph Mitchell. Mitchell? The case of Joseph Mitchell in September 2010 in Hillsborough, North Carolina. Another, yeah, there's another sleepwalking case. So he was accused of putting on a Halloween mask and strangling his 4-year-old son, subsequently attacking his teenage son and daughter, who managed to survive. The defense claimed that Mitchell committed these acts while sleepwalking and that financial stress might have triggered the episode. The defense argument was centered on Mitchell's state of mind, suggesting he was under significant stress due to financial troubles, which could have contributed to his sleepwalking. Non-REM parasomnias, including sleepwalking, are known to cause complex behaviors during sleep, and sometimes these can be violent or aggressive without conscious intent. On the other hand, the prosecution painted a different picture, arguing that Mitchell was a serial liar and that the crimes were premeditated. They questioned the validity of the sleepwalking defense and highlighted inconsistencies in Mitchell's statements and actions. Despite the severity of the crime and the prosecution's efforts, the jury ultimately sided with the defense, acquitting Mitchell. This decision was influenced by the prosecution's lack of concrete evidence to contradict the sleepwalking defense. Do you have to prove that he wasn't sleepwalking?
Yeah, that's the thing I was just thinking. Like, that's bullshit. You don't have to prove that he wasn't sleepwalking. He has to prove that he was sleepwalking. You know what I mean? You don't have to show anything. You say this person did this. That's all you have to do, and then prove that they did it. Now, if
Yeah.
someone wants to come along and say, well, no, they were out of their mind when they did it, they have to prove, and this is in the United States. I don't know about Australia. They probably still wear the white wigs in the courts in Australia because they're all, still kind of bound to England. Sorry, Australia, we love you, but it's time to break away. But yeah, you're absolutely right, man. You have to prove that. Now, I understand they have to prove that you did it, and we're talking American courts here, but that's not up in the air.
Well,
That's
and
admitted to.
I mean, I guess it's the sort of the burden of proof being beyond a reasonable doubt for criminal cases. Like, if you can reasonably doubt their intent because of the possibility of sleepwalking, like we definitely want to, I think, as a society, we want to acquit guilty people much more than we want to convict innocent people. We are willing
100%.
to make the mistake more in the other way
Yeah.
than accidentally send innocent people to prison, which happens anyway.
Yeah.
But I mean,
that's how it should be.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this. It's like, if this is a civil case and you're going on a preponderance of evidence, so it's more like a balance as opposed to the like beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
Maybe some of it, I don't know. It's
It's
so odd
just
that they would
so
have to
bizarre.
prove that he wasn't sleepwalking.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is worth noting that some of the jurors expressed skepticism about his claims of sleepwalking, indicating that they may not have fully believed his story, but felt compelled to acquit due to insufficient evidence against him, which that's their job. I would hate to be on a jury like that.
Oh yeah.
I was going to be on a jury years ago that was about rape, and they had the guy there, like while they were interviewing jurors. Luckily, at the time, I worked for a military contractor, so I literally legally could not talk about what I did for a living. So when they interviewed me and they're like, "What do you do?" I was like, "I work here. I am not allowed to tell you what I do."
Yeah.
They're like, "All right, well, we don't know about you, so get out."
Dude, if it was me,
But it's like, I just kept thinking about that, and it's like, this guy that was sitting there was just like, "Okay, I guess this is just what we're doing now." Like, he just seemed like somebody kind of caught up in something. It's like he could have done it, but it's like, I could also totally see how hard it would be to try to convince yourself one way or the other
yeah.
that this guy really did rape somebody, where he's claiming like, no, this was consensual, but she got upset about it after the fact. It's like, that is such a messy thing to try to sort through. I was so glad I was on that jury.
That's when you have to look at like rape kits and tearing and things like
Physical
that
evidence, yeah.
prove that it wasn't. But I mean, if I was the prosecutor, I would go to the jury, and I don't know how it works in Australia, but I know here, you get to present your closing argument. I would go to each juror and I would say, "You want this guy moving into your apartment building? You want this guy moving in next door to you? Do you want this guy to work at the school where your kids go? Do you want that? If that's what you want, then acquit." And I think that would hold a lot of sway. But yeah, so these are the cases. There's probably, a lot of other cases out there too, but these are the ones that I thought, we get a feel from kind of around the world and throughout time how this has been handled. Now, I mean, shit, before 1845 or whenever the Terrell case was, they'd probably be like, "Dude, you're a witch. we're gonna burn your ass. You know what I mean? Like it's so different from back in like 1845 to now, but we're seeing a lot of the same outcomes, and that's just really weird to me. But
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I wouldn't want somebody that was a sleepwalk killer living around me. Period.
Yeah.
Period.
Okay, so there are a few potential paranormal explanations for these events, which we can get into. This somnambulism or these altered states of consciousness. The first one would be the jinn, also, or the jinn. I don't know how to get that D very clearly. The jinn part, also known as jinn or genies. These are supernatural entities typically found in Islamic traditions, folklore, and literature. They're believed to be invisible to humans and possess abilities beyond human capabilities, such as shapeshifting, invisibility, and moving at incredibly high speeds. According to Islamic theology, jinn were created from smokeless fire, distinct from humans who are created from clay. This makes them a separate order of creation alongside angels and humans. And we've definitely talked about this before, so this sounds familiar and you're a regular listener. We have said this before. Jinn are considered sentient beings with free will, meaning they can choose to be good, evil, or neutral, just like humans. This concept contrasts with angels in Islamic belief who are always obedient to God's will. Jinn are generally invisible to humans, but can take on various forms, including human or animal shapes. Their supernatural abilities, like possessing people, influencing dreams, or granting wishes, have made them popular in folklore or stories. But the possession and the influence of dreams is particularly where this would potentially explain something like this. Even as recently as Dune Part 2, I mean, they're talking about jinn in movies still. You know, there's the part where Paul Atreides is going into the desert on his own, and they're telling him on this planet, there are jinn out there. Be careful. They will whisper to you. They will tell you things. They will try to get in somehow, and they will influence you.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So,
mean, here's the thing, like, I'm starting to think that, we just don't get a lot of stories from the Muslim parts of the world, you know? I
yeah.
mean, we get, like, okay, a lot of them, and I believe I read somewhere that if you believe in the Quran, you believe in jinn, period. If you don't
Mhm.
believe in jinn, you don't really believe in the Quran. I don't know if that's true, whatever, but I just wonder if there's cases like this, or if because it is in the Muslim world, there's not cases like this, and they're like, we don't care why you did that. You're dying. You know what I mean?
That could be a cultural thing. Yeah.
Like, I mean, we've all heard the stories like, oh, if you're here and, you're starving and you steal a raisin from a stand, they chop your hands off. And I think a lot of that is just some like BS propaganda to make us think like, oh, everybody in Muslim countries is psychotic and they just murder you for no reason and stuff like that. But I mean, there could be a lot of truth to it too. I really can't say for sure. I don't know anybody that has come from like Iraq or Saudi Arabia or anything like. I know
Yeah.
a girl whose family lives in Dubai. That's a little different. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I knew some people from Turkey.
mhm.
They were Muslim, but again, it's a little bit different from this. And jinn never came up or anything. We talked about like architecture and things like that.
Yeah.
When I found out both these people are from Istanbul,
Oh gosh,
I was
I
like,
bet
oh
it's
my
just
God. Like,
insane.
yeah, I was like, is this really still here? Is that really still there? Like,
Yeah,
what are these things like? How does that blend with modern
yeah.
architecture? And she was like, you ask a lot of questions for an American. She was
Most
like,
of the
most
time, we just
Americans
want to
want
talk
to know
about
what we,
ourselves.
yeah, she was like, most Americans want to know what we think of America, not want us to talk about where we're from, or especially know as much as you happen to know. And it's like I had
Yeah,
just gone through this kick where I became obsessed with Istanbul and that part of the, like Constantinople to Istanbul and that
right.
transition.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like it was such a weird synchronicity that I met her through grad school. It's like, oh, this is
I
HA. It's from Istanbul. And it's like, no shit. And we've got
yeah.
like a 2 hour project to work on together. Let's go.
I would like to visit Istanbul at some point if it's safe, and I just really don't know. You just never
Who
know.
knows?
Uh, yeah, I'm friends with a woman from Kenya, and I keep like pestering her. I'm like, well, what are your local legends? What's the folklore around? Have you ever heard of the Nikinaka? Have you heard of the Nani beast? And she's like, no. I mean, we have lions everywhere. I mean, you can drive out into like we would drive to Rockwoods Reservation or Lone Elk Park, and there's bison and elk. They go to nature preserves, and there's tigers and giraffes and shit. But
Yeah.
I keep pestering her like, oh, tell me about some of the, local cryptids and stuff. So she's probably sick of me too, but whatever. All right. So let's wrap this up with my dog's name, my little terror, my little ginger maned wolf named Mara. So that translates to old hag, I believe. So it is a Norse belief, Vikings and stuff like that. So the Norse Mara, also known as Mare or Mara, uh, obviously nightmare, that's where it came from, is a figure from Norse mythology and Scandinavian folklore associated with sleep disturbances, nightmares, and a haunting presence during sleep. The concept of the Mara has influenced cultural perceptions of nightmares and is linked to broader European folklore. The word Mara comes from Old Norse, and it basically is nightmare or oppressive force. Sorry about that. So the folklore around the Mara aligns with modern understandings of sleep paralysis, a phenomenon where individuals experience the inability to move or speak while waking up or falling asleep. And this presence is a sensation of pressure on the chest, and that's common in sleep paralysis. So we're talking about sleep paralysis, but in a sense, I mean, if you are not acting on your own will, you're kind of paralyzed too. You know what I mean? Like, does that make sense, or does that sound totally dumb? And you
I
can be
get it.
honest.
I'm following you.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you're not choosing your movements. Put it that way.
Yeah.
So now there's there's some other things that we can talk about. So there is the thought that when you are sleepwalking, a demon is experimenting with possession. So it could be like, hey, we're trying to figure out how to possess people. We can do it when their guard's down. Let's see what we can make them do. We can make them walk around. Okay, well, can you make them drive? Okay, we can make them drive. Okay, well, can you make them kill somebody? I mean, with what we talk about, we have to take that as a possibility. What's the next possibility?
The next possibility is astral projection, and that somehow influencing the body to follow.
Yeah, like your spirit's going somewhere and the body's like, I got to keep up with my spirit.
I mean,
He's
they
going to
report
need me when he wakes up.
the silver cord, that there's always still a connection, or there's supposed to be. If there's not, that's a problem. The silver cord is what kind of saves your seat so you can come back.
Got to have that. So there's another theory that you're following messages from beyond, which could also, include demonic possession or being led by a spirit guide. And again, that is your body following your spirit. And then lastly, we have
temporary access to an alternate reality or universe.
Yeah, that's a scary one, right? Like maybe this guy was attacked in this alternate reality by a gang of angry ostriches. I mean, listen, if we were doing a true crime show, I wouldn't even be talking about this. But we're doing Cryptique, and the possession episodes are popular. I mean, we have to look at it as a possibility. Do I believe this guy? No. But is it possible? I don't know. I think anything's possible, Ryan.
Yeah, it's probably happened before that somebody's used this, but like 2001, I think was a little too early for it. But like to say I was dreaming about like a zombie survival game that I was playing. Like me and my friends played the like Nazi zombie survival thing in Call of Duty World at War on the PS3 and Xbox 360, something like that. Like we played that game a lot, and then we play that survival mode a lot. And I could imagine somebody having some messed up dreams or sleepwalking from doing that. That's kind of more believable than ostriches to me.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think this guy was full of shit,
Yeah,
but I do think that's a possibility. And just the fact that maybe I should talk to a therapist and be like, hey, I just want to let you know about this sleepwalking incident I had where I was semi-conscious. Is that a thing? Does that normally happen? Because I mean, I remember to this day having the thought of, why did somebody put clothes in front of my bedroom door? And I was getting
Yeah.
fired up about it. Who would do that? How did they? I get up to go get a drink of water. I come back and somebody put a damn closet where my room's supposed to be. It's
Yeah.
it's just one of those things. And when people talk about dreams, I mean, most people, if someone says, man, I had a dream last night, they're not going to be like, well, I had a dream that I was vacuuming. Now they might be like, I had a dream that I was vacuuming the roof outside my house, and I was being forced to do so by a woman with bird legs and a man who was pulling himself along and had no torso. I mean, I could buy that. But yeah, so when we're in these states, we are experiencing extremely odd things. I mean, I'm sure people do have some mundane dreams, and it's just not something where they run in, and hop online. They're like, guess what? I had a dream about vacuuming my floor last night, because that's not going to get clicks. Nobody cares. But,
Yeah.
when they go on and they're like, I had this crazy dream, people want to hear about it. So who knows? It could be a lot. It could be all these things, Ryan. You know what we like to say?
Oh.
It could be. So, I mean, that's really, really all I've got on it. I do think that it's extremely interesting. I do want to keep track of, future cases to see how things are going. But I mean, to me, I think a lot of it that we covered, they're full of it.
Who was it that you interviewed?
Vicky Joy Anderson.
No, it wasn't Vicky, because I have like a weird crush on Vicky now after listening to your interview. The guy that you talked to, who he was talking about people being locked into like these experiences in comas.
Oh,
Or,
Alan
like,
Pierce.
Yeah. See, I was thinking about some of what he said during this, where people are locked having these horrible experiences over and over again in these dream or dream-like scenarios. While I was sick, I mean, I had a week almost where I had a fever of like 102, 103, up to 10, like almost dangerously high for a really long time. And I was having really bizarre dreams. They were like stress dreams. I'd be trying to do something, trying to achieve something over and over again. I would realize eventually that like my body was actually moving, or I was physically, like I was trying to say something in the dream, but I couldn't. And I would actually start saying it out loud. I would wake up and realize it was happening. So I do wonder if these disturbed sleep states really do have more to do with this. Yeah. That they could cause you to act out if you're stuck in this like weird dream loop to the point that your body starts reacting to it. But
I think it depends on the severity.
Yeah.
Like if me and you are, squatching and you're asleep in your tent and I shake your tent and I'm like, Ryan, wake up. And you're like, whoa, and you swing and punch me through the tent. I get it. But if you say, hold on a second, I'll be right out. And I hear in the zipper, I'm like, Ryan's sleepwalking. He's going to kill me. Sasquatches come in and save us. Or save me, at least.
Sasquatch is in the background like, you're on your own. Oh.
Yeah. But no, and the thing is you don't dream when you're in a coma. It's non-REM. They expect, like they tell you, oh, it's just they're just dreaming. And I see this all the time. Oh, how you dream in a coma and stuff like that. And it's like, you're not REM. You're not dreaming. Your brain goes black. There's no activity. So don't act like putting someone in a coma is, oh, they're just going to go to sleep and dream. No, they're going to lay in you lay in your bed for a week and you lose 25% of your muscle mass. You lay in a bed for 4 weeks, you're going to come out screwed. But anyway, I guess that's neither here nor there. We should probably just wrap this up. I know you got stuff to do. So I don't think we really need final thoughts. I think we kind of went over it. So
yeah, I would agree. All right, but guys, definitely check out the YouTube channel at Cryptique Podcast for the video version of the show with sometimes some, slides, images, some little jokes added in. Let us know about your worst nightmares or sleepwalking experiences at cryptiquepodcast@gmail.com. And for a small one-time or large one-time or large recurring donation, whatever you like, I don't want to yuck anyone's yum, you can buy us a cup of coffee at buymeacoffee.com/cryptiquepi. We appreciate it, and it helps keep the servers going and the microphones
tax deductible. Donations are tax deductible, guys. You want to give it to the government or give it to us?
And you can
Just
check
saying.
out our designs on t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, pint glasses, and stickers at cryptiquepodcaststore.com.
And remember, if you live with a sleepwalker, just beware. Hide the weapons, hide the keys, hide the sporks. All right, that's all we got for you. We will be back soon. Next week, I am going to be talking about the Batutut and the Vietnam rock apes. And there is a lot to talk about. There is a region in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos that has all these reports of wild men living there. And before you click stop or exit or whatever, you should just know that in this area recently, and when I say recently, I mean within the past like 5 years, they have found animals that are over 400 pounds. Now we're talking about a type of, I don't know if it's a cattle or a cow, ox, deer. It's something like that. But yeah, they just discovered them, brand new, never seen before. There's still stuff hiding out there, Crypt Keepers, and we're going to tell you about it. Join us next. Good evening, Crypt Keepers.